What up, my fellow DJs? This is Jamie Selects, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to use my DJ Finances template spreadsheet that I linked to in my Taxes for DJs article found on my blog at jamieselects.com. Hope it helps. The first thing you're going to want to do is make a copy. So go up to File, hit Make a Copy, and make a copy for yourself so that way you can actually edit the fields, as this one you'll see right here is set to view only. Now once you make a copy, you can go ahead and start filling it in, and you'll see that it's split into 4 different tabs. You have the gig list, current expenses, capital expenses, and the non-gig driving log. So now I'll walk you through how to use each one. The gig list. It's where you record all of your gigs, the revenue they bring in, and most importantly, the costs you incur for performing at each one. For each gig, you're going to want to record the date, what gig it was, a short description of the gig, and perhaps what city it was located in, your gross revenue, so how much you earned for performing, and then also all of your travel costs. Now, this travel cost column is a formula, and it's a summation of all of the separate travel costs, which we'll go over here. The miles driven doesn't actually add up within the formula because it's not a direct cost, it's just miles driven, which is recorded separately within your taxes. So if you drove to the gig, you want to still record that here, but you'll see it won't change the travel cost total there. Local public transportation, so this is going to be things like the bus or the Muni, if you're lucky enough to live in San Francisco and take that, or the BART for that matter. Tolls, if you're crossing the bridge, you pay a toll. Parking is if you pay to park. And then local ride share, this is if you take a Lyft to or from the gig, you can record that cost here. Now you'll see these other costs have this parentheses overnight travel. And this is because overnight travel is recorded in a separate area when filling out your taxes. So if you do a traveling gig, which you'll see in the second example here, you're going to want to put all of your travel costs here, and this will make filing your taxes much easier when you have to differentiate between local transportation and overnight expenses. The taxable revenue, this is going to take your gross revenue and subtract your travel costs. See, we have 70 here. And then this last column here is mostly for personal use. It's just a good way to estimate how much money you're actually net after all the costs and taxes that you incur. Okay, now we're going to go over the current expenses tab. So go ahead and click over to current expenses, and I'm going to show you 2 ways that I record costs. Number 1 is for music related expenses. For music related expenses, I add up the yearly total as opposed to doing every single iTunes purchase or every single Beatport purchase. It's easier just to add up the total I spent for the entire year. Same thing goes with record pools. So in the example here, for the 2020 total, item record pool membership. In the description, I put how much the record pool is, and then multiplied by how many months that you used it for. Some of them you use for the entire year. Other times you're just trying out other ones. You want to indicate how many months you were using the record pool. The category in this instance is going to be other/music. The cost is what it spent, or what it cost, for the whole year. So if it's $19.99 times 12, you see $239.88. You enter that here. You'll notice the spreadsheet rounds it up. This is because when you're doing your taxes, the software will do the same thing. It doesn't use cents when you're filling it out. So in the spreadsheet here, it's going to round it up for you or round down, depending on where you're at. The percent business column, this is meant to indicate what percent of the purchase was for business use and what was for personal. So for DJs out there, all of your music purchases can be set to 100% for business. And the deduction column here is going to do a quick calculation of what you can actually deduct on your taxes. The receipt column, this is important. This is where you want to show proof of the purchase. So this can be things like actually including a picture of the receipt in this column, or you can show, like I do here, chase statement. So if you know what credit card that you use, you can just say, credit card, or what credit card you have, and then the statement. In the article, I recommend using a specific credit card for all of your DJ related expenses, so that way you don't have personal expenses and DJ expenses mixed up together, it makes things a lot easier. But essentially in this column, you just want to show where you can find proof of the purchase. So it might be Amazon account, or another good thing to do is if you get email receipts, be sure to create a label within the email account and just say tax or receipts, and then tag every single receipt that comes in with that label. And then you can say things like, Gmail tax label. That way, if you get audited, you can easily go back and find the proof of all these purchases. So now I'm going to go over this category box here. This is essentially all of the relevant categories that you're going to run into as a DJ or a personal brand. And then I've added a few of the ones that I use myself as well, just to give you an example of ones that you might run into. Music's obviously going to be music. Training can be things like DJ lessons. Subscriptions are subscriptions that aren't necessarily related to music. So let's say you subscribe to a podcast or something like that. It can be a subscription here. A business conference. So these are things like if you go to NAMM or if you go to Beyond the Music, any expense related to the conference you'll put in this column. Books, I have like a personal development brand, and so books are an expense that I record for that. So I put other/books. Other is just any expense that you can't come up with a good category for. You can just put as other and then label it when you're actually filling out your taxes. Supplies and gear, this is going to be small gear purchases or supplies, so things like XLR cables, USB cables, needle replacements, things of that nature. These are like day-to-day gear purchases. The bigger gear purchases we'll go over in a second. Those are going to go in the capital expenses tab, but for day-to-day expenses, they can go here. Vehicle expenses, depending on how you write off your vehicle expenses, refer to the article for instructions on how to do that. This may not be relevant, but similar to the home office, you can record both of those expenses here. I think it's good to record them regardless of whether you're using the standard approaches that the IRS offers. Meals and entertainment, this is for business meals specifically. So let's say you're trying to get a new gig with a new promoter and you want to take them out to dinner. That would be considered a business meal, and so you can put that here. And this is another spot to put all of your overnight travel expenses. And then lastly, advertising. These are things in relation to anything to promote your business. So if you're hiring a graphic designer, if you are doing Instagram ads, anything that's related to marketing, you can put under the advertising category. Now, if you want to create your own category, what you do is you highlight this whole row, right click and say insert one below, and then you type in new category, and then you're going to want to make sure to copy this down so that way the formula copies over, and then you'll notice that your new category is here. Now we're going to go over the capital expenses tab. So if you haven't already, go ahead and click into the capital expenses tab, and you'll notice it's set up very similar to the current expenses tab, and that's because in regards to recording them, it's essentially the same. We just want to make sure that we record capital expenses separately as they're filed differently when filling out your taxes. So again, to remind you, capital expenses are things like large DJ purchases or software that's used for business that's going to have a life of more than a single year. So for example, if you bought the Serato DJ Pro Suite, or if you bought a new controller, or Pioneer comes out with a new mixer and you want to buy that mixer, these are going to be recorded here in the capital expenses tab. So similar idea, date, the item, the description of what it's for. The categories are going to be down here in this box and they'll populate here. If you want to create a new category, it's the same thing. Highlight the row, hit insert one below, fill in your new category, copy the formula over, and you'll see the new category pop up here. Again, enter the cost, percent of business, and it's going to give you the deduction, save the receipt, and you're going to be all set for when you record your capital expenses. Last but not least, we have the tab called non-gig driving log, and this again is what it sounds. This is for recording any miles that you drive in your vehicle that aren't specifically related to a gig that you didn't record in the gig list. So an example that I've used here is on February 1st, I drove to Stockton from Oakland, California, where I live. The round trip was about 120 miles. Write a description of what it was for, And that's essentially it. And then you'll see at the bottom here, it's going to sum up your total miles for the year. And again, this particular section is just to make sure that you're adding up all the miles that you drove for your DJ business that aren't specifically related to gigs, but that you still want to write off. Because when you're writing off vehicle expenses for your taxes, you use the total miles driven, not only for gigs, but anything in relation to your DJ business. So even if you're just driving over to a homie's house to practice together, to do a scratch session, if you drive to a lesson, if you drive to the store to go pick up a new piece of gear, all these miles can be recorded here in this non-gig driving log. And last but not least, this section over here, this is for where you can record the number of miles at the beginning of the year. If you haven't done this already, then go ahead and just estimate based on where you're currently at, but just as a good practice, this is always good to do at the beginning of every year. Just put in how many miles are in your odometer right here, because it will ask you that when filling out your taxes. Once again, my name is Jamie Selects. I hope you found this video tutorial helpful. If you did, I'd really appreciate it if you could share it out with any of your DJ homies or anyone else you think would find this valuable. Peace.